Everyone praised you for staying calm. No one noticed you'd simply stopped existing in the room. You felt it again today. The moment a conversation tightened, something in you just pulled back. You changed the subject when voices started to rise. You said it's fine while it wasn't. You walked away from something hard, already rehearsing an apology you never owed. And you've called it being calm, being mature, keeping the peace. But this withdrawal isn't a flaw, and it was never weakness. This quiet shutting down learned its job long before you noticed, back in a childhood you'd swear had nothing to do with it. If you already recognize yourself in this, take a second and subscribe, because what we're about to put into words is something most people feel their whole lives and never get the chance to name. So today we're not here to fix you or hand you 10 steps to speak up more. We're going to do something stranger and far gentler. We're going back to find the exact moment this silence first walked into the room and decided to keep you safe. The psychology of withdrawal. Your childhood shaped this pattern. Let's start with what it actually looks like, because you'd probably never call it withdrawal. It's subtle. The room gets tense, and you go quiet, not because you have nothing to say, but because some part of you decided that saying it isn't worth the risk. You nod. You soften your face. You let the other person win a point you know was wrong. And later, alone, the whole argument replays in your head, finally finding all the words you swallowed. And here's the strange part. You've probably been praised for it. People call you easygoing, the peacemaker, the one who never makes a fuss. Teachers loved it, partners lean on it, bosses count on it. So it never occurred to you that this thing everyone admires might also be the thing quietly costing you the most. Because keeping the peace on the outside almost always means starting a small war on the inside. And that war, it never really ends. But this didn't start with you. To understand it, we have to go back, past the adult who shrinks in meetings, past the partner who says, "I'm fine," all the way to a much smaller version of you. There was a moment, maybe many moments, you might not even remember clearly. A raised voice in another room, a door closing too hard, a silence at the dinner table so heavy you could feel it pressing on your chest. You were just a kid then. And a kid can't leave. A kid can't fix the tension between the giants who run their world. So you did the one thing within your power. You got small. You learned to read the air before anyone spoke, scanning faces for the first hint of a storm. This is where hypervigilance is born, not as a disorder, but as a brilliant little radar a child builds to survive. You weren't being dramatic, you were being smart in the only way you could. Because here's what that small body figured out, faster than any words could explain it. When the grown-ups fight, being invisible is safer than being seen. If you made no waves, maybe the storm would pass you by. If you took up no space, maybe no one would turn their anger toward you. So staying small stopped being something you did and became something you were. And that quiet math, disappear to stay safe, didn't expire when you grew up. It just went underground. There's a name for what happens in your body in those moments, and it's worth knowing. When tension spikes, your nervous system doesn't calculate. It reacts. Most people know fight or flight. But there's a third option your body chose long ago, the freeze response. When fighting felt impossible and fleeing wasn't allowed, freezing was the survival path left. Your throat tightens, your mind goes blank, words evaporate. That blankness you hate yourself for? It's not stupidity. It's an old, automatic kind of protection. This is the part that tends to land hard. The freeze you feel as an adult, in the meeting, in the argument, in the moment you most want to defend yourself, is the same freeze that protected a child who had no other defense. Your body isn't betraying you now. It's keeping a promise it made decades ago, a promise to keep you safe at any cost. The tragedy isn't that you shut down. It's that no one ever told you why you do. In 1975, a psychologist named Edward Tronick ran an experiment that still unsettles people today. He called it the still face. A mother plays warmly with her baby, then suddenly goes blank, flat, unresponsive, expressionless. Within seconds, the baby tries everything to win her back, reaching, smiling, crying. And when nothing works, the baby looks away, curls inward, and goes still, quiet. Withdrawn, that tiny shutdown captured on film, is the very first draft of the pattern you still run today. Sit with that for a second. The baby didn't choose to withdraw. It wasn't a decision. It was biology, doing the only sensible thing when connection suddenly vanished. If reaching out brings nothing back, you stop reaching. You protect yourself from the ache of trying. Now imagine that still face wasn't a 2-minute experiment, but a regular weather pattern in your home. A parent too exhausted, too checked out, too overwhelmed to light up when you walked in. You'd learn the same lesson, wouldn't you? And that's the quiet engine of so much emotional neglect. It's rarely loud. It's not always a slammed door or a shouting match. Sometimes it's just an absence. A parent physically there but emotionally somewhere else. No one to ask how your day really went. No one to notice the worry on your small face. So you learn to handle it alone. To stop bringing your feelings to people who couldn't hold them. And that lesson grew up right alongside you. So you became your own caretaker way too early. Hiding what you felt turned into a reflex, smooth and automatic. Someone asks how you're doing, and good you? Leaves your mouth before you've even checked inside. This is emotional withdrawal in its most disguised form, not dramatic distance, but a polite little wall, built so well that even you forget it's there. You're present in the conversation, nodding along, while the real you watches quietly from somewhere behind your own eyes, and no one ever notices the person who isn't quite there. This is also where avoidant attachment quietly takes root. Psychologists who study how kids bond with their caregivers noticed something telling. Some children, when a parent leaves and returns, act like they don't care at all. Calm. Indifferent. But hook them up to monitors and their little hearts are racing with distress. They learn to hide the need, not erase it. Sound familiar? You can want closeness desperately and still go cold the second it's offered, because somewhere back there, needing someone out loud felt unbearably dangerous. Let me tell you about one person who lived this. A boy who grew up in a house that was never violent, never cruel, just quiet in the wrong way. Dinners passed in silence. Feelings weren't discussed. They were managed or ignored. When he cried, no one came, so he taught himself to stop crying. He became the easy one, the kid who needed nothing. Everyone said how mature he was. No one saw that his maturity was really just a child who'd given up on being met halfway. He carried that boy into his 30s without ever noticing. In every relationship, the moment things got tense or too close, he'd vanish. Not physically, but emotionally. He'd go flat, get busy, change the subject. Partners called him distant. He honestly couldn't see it. To him, withdrawing wasn't a choice. It was just air, just gravity, just how things were. The protective retreat that once kept a lonely boy safe was now quietly dismantling every connection the man actually wanted. And he had no idea why. Maybe you know that exact bind. You crave to be seen, and you flinch the instant someone really looks. You want to be asked, then deflect when they ask. This isn't hypocrisy, and it isn't you being broken. It's two truths from two different times, sitting in one body. The grown-up who longs for closeness, and the child who learned closeness comes with a cost. They're both you. They've just never been properly introduced, and until they are, they'll keep pulling in opposite directions. Notice how often this turns into people-pleasing too. If you can't safely express what you need, the next best strategy is to become whatever keeps everyone calm. You read the room, adjust your face, manage other people's moods like it's your personal responsibility. Walking on eggshells stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like love, but underneath the niceness sits a quiet, exhausting belief that your welcome here depends on you being easy. That if you ever got difficult, the warmth might just switch off. And conflict avoidance is the natural child of all this. To you, conflict was never just disagreement. It was the sound of the world becoming unsafe. So you'll do almost anything to make it stop. You apologize first. You take blame that isn't yours. You let things slide that genuinely hurt, telling yourself it isn't worth it. Each time, you're not really choosing peace. You're choosing the old survival. You're that kid again, trying to lower the temperature in a house where you were never meant to be the thermostat. Here's something worth trying, gently. The next time you feel that familiar pull to go quiet, don't force yourself to speak. That's not the work yet. Instead, just notice where it lives in your body. The tight throat, the held breath, the stomach that drops. Put a hand there and silently say, "I know why you're doing this. Thank you." You're not fixing anything. You're doing what no one did back then. You're noticing the child, instead of leaving them to handle it alone. Because that's the real wound underneath the withdrawal, not the silence itself, but the aloneness it was built to survive. Every time you shut down, a part of you is still bracing for a world where no one comes. Where reaching out returns nothing, where your feelings are a burden you'd better carry quietly. Learned silence was never about having nothing to say. It was about deciding, long ago, that saying it wouldn't be safe, and that no one would catch it anyway. And this is what almost no one tells you. That silence was an act of hope, not defeat. Strange as it sounds, the child who went quiet was still trying to belong, still trying to be good enough to keep. Withdrawing was how you stayed in the room with people you couldn't afford to lose. It was loyalty, bent into a shape that hurt you, which raises a question you may have never dared to ask. What did all that quiet actually cost you? So let's name the cost, honestly. Every time you swallowed your words, you taught the people around you a quiet lie. That you were fine, that you needed nothing, that you had no edges. They believed you because you were so convincing, and then you resented them for not seeing through it. That's the cruel loop of holding it in. You hide so well that no one reaches for you, and then the not being reached for confirms the very fear that made you hide. You built the cage, then mistook it for the world. There's a deeper price too, one that's harder to see. When you spend years biting your tongue, you slowly lose track of what you actually think. Your own opinions get faint, like a radio station drifting out of range. Someone asks what you want, for dinner, for your life, for the weekend, and you genuinely don't know, because you were never the one who got to decide. You learn to locate yourself only by reading others, and a person who can only find themselves in a mirror eventually forgets they have a face of their own. This is what developmental trauma really does. It's not always the dramatic event people picture. Often it's the slow, daily shaping of a child around an environment that couldn't meet them. Drop by drop, you learned which parts of you were welcome and which to hide. The loud feelings, the big needs, the inconvenient anger, those went into a back room and the door closed. You weren't lying about who you were. You were editing yourself down to a version that felt survivable. And you've been reading from that edited script ever since. But here's where the ground starts to shift. That script was written by a child, a brilliant, frightened, deeply loving child doing the best they could with no power and no choices. They wrote the rules to keep you alive, and they did. You're here. It worked. But you are not that child anymore. You're an adult now, with a front door you can open, a voice that can't be punished the way theirs could, relationships you actually get to choose. The rules that once saved you are quietly outliving their purpose. This is the moment so many people miss, so don't rush past it. Recognizing the pattern can feel like blame, like you've just discovered all the ways you're messed up. But that's the old script talking, turning insight into one more reason to feel ashamed. Flip it. What you're actually looking at is evidence of how hard a small person fought to stay safe and loved in a situation they didn't create. That's not damage, that's devotion. The withdrawal was never the problem. It was the proof of how much you cared about staying. So what changes? Not the past. That's set. What changes is who's holding the pen now. Breaking the pattern doesn't mean forcing yourself to be loud or confrontational or somebody you're not. It means something quieter and far more powerful. Noticing the freeze as it rises and offering yourself a choice the child never had. To stay one extra second in the hard conversation. To say, actually, that bothered me, even if your voice shakes. Small, almost invisible acts, each one a vote for a different life. Here's a concrete way in. Pick one low-stakes moment this week. A friend asks where to eat, a small preference, nothing dangerous. And instead of, I don't mind, tell the truth, I'd love Italian. That's it. It'll feel absurdly big for something so small, and that tells you everything about how long you've been hiding. You're not learning to have opinions. You've always had them. You're learning that having them out loud no longer ends in punishment. You're teaching your nervous system a new ending to an old story. This is what reparenting actually means, not some abstract self-help phrase, but a daily, practical act. It's becoming the steady adult that little version of you needed and didn't get. When the freeze hits, instead of criticizing yourself for going quiet, you turn inward and say what should have been said back then. Your feelings make sense. You're allowed to take up space. I'm not going anywhere. You become the one who stays. And slowly, the child who learned to disappear starts to believe they're finally safe enough to be seen. None of this is fast, and anyone promising otherwise is selling something. Old defense mechanisms don't vanish. They soften with patience and repetition. There will be days you shut down completely and only notice hours later. That's not failure. That's the pattern showing you it's still being rewired. The goal was never to withdraw again. It's to withdraw with awareness, to come back faster, to spend less time stranded behind that wall. Every return is a small homecoming. Every return tells the child, this time, someone came back for you. And maybe that's the quiet revolution hiding inside all of this. For years, you waited. Without even knowing you were waiting, for someone to finally notice the kid who went silent, to walk into that emotional room and say, I see you, come out, it's okay now. You kept hoping the right person would do it, but here's the tender, almost unbearable truth. The person you were waiting for all this time was always going to have to be you, and no one ever told you that you were allowed. So if you felt something tighten in your chest while listening, stay with it instead of pushing it down. That feeling is the child, finally being heard. All those years of staying small, of swallowing your words, of choosing everyone's comfort over your own voice, none of it was weakness, and none of it was you being broken. It was a map, drawn in the dark, leading you back to the exact place you first learned to disappear. And now, for maybe the first time, you're holding that map in the daylight, reading it with kind eyes. You don't have to do anything dramatic with what you've seen here. You don't have to confront anyone, or rewrite your whole personality by morning. The shift already happened, quietly, the moment you understood that your silence had a reason, a young, loyal, deeply human reason. The shutdown was never the enemy. It was a child's love, wearing the only disguise it had, and once you can see it for what it truly was, you get to decide, gently and on your own terms, what happens next. So let me ask you something, and let it land however it needs to. What would it mean to stop treating your silence as a flaw, and start hearing it as a message from someone small who once needed you? Because that's what it always was, not a defect to fix, but a story asking to finally be understood. You've spent so long being the one who keeps the peace. What might change if you offered a little of that peace to yourself? Here's what I'd love you to sit with this week. The next time you feel that familiar pull to go quiet, don't fight it and don't judge it, just notice it and whisper, I know why you're here. That's not weakness. That's the beginning of a relationship with yourself you were never taught to have. And if you can, do one tiny brave thing. Say one true thing out loud, even if your voice shakes. Watch how the world doesn't end. And I want you to leave something in the comments, just one word. The word that describes the child you used to be. Not who you are now, but who you were back then, before you learned to disappear. Maybe it's quiet. Maybe it's watchful. Maybe it's tired. Whatever it is, write it down and read the others. You'll realize, sometimes for the first time, just how many people were carrying the same silence in the same dark, thinking they were the only one. Thank you, truly, from the bottom of my heart, for staying all the way to the end of this. That you gave this your time and your attention says something quietly profound about you. A part of you is ready to stop hiding. So here's the truth I'll leave you holding. That child didn't get to choose the silence they learned, but the silence you keep from here on? That part was never decided for you, and it's yours to choose now. You changed the subject for years to keep everyone else calm. Maybe it's finally your turn to be heard. If this gave words to something you've carried in silence, you might quietly follow along. There's more we'll uncover together, slowly, the way the truest things are always found. And yet, even as you start to let yourself be heard, you might notice something stubborn underneath it. That quiet need to earn it, to be good, useful, impressive enough to deserve the warmth that should have just been yours. You learned to perform for the love you needed, and somewhere along the way the performing became you. Recognizing the silence is one thing. Understanding why you still audition for people who should have loved you for free, that's the next door. And it's been waiting longer than you think.